हाथ रखकर मुझे कहना पड़ता है, इंतहाई दर्द दिल के साथ कहना पड़ता है कि इस वक्त बलूचिस्तान के 5 से 7 अजला इस पोजीशन में हैं कि अगर वो आजादी का ऐलान कर दें तो अगले दिन अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा में उनकी दरख्वास्त को कबूल कर लिया जाएगा और पाकिस्तान को तक़सीम तस्वुर किया जाएगा। कहां खड़े हैं हम लोग? मेरी गुफ्तगू को जज्बाती गुफ्तगू न समझा जाए, मैं जज्बाती बातें नहीं किया करता।
Namaste everyone, welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is kushalmehra. I purposely played that particular clip to begin our discussion today. I have Sushant Sareen with me. That clip was from MP Maulana Fazl-ur-Rehman. He addressed the National Assembly of Pakistan where he claimed what you heard. His claim is that at least 5 to 7 districts, if they wanted, they could leave Pakistan and declare independence. Now, I wanted to talk about this with Sushant, as he is the Pakistan expert, and especially nowadays with Pakistan doing so well in the Champions Trophy, I think it was such a auspicious occasion to discuss this very serious issue of Balochistan. So, Sushant, what do we make of this statement? Because it's been made on the National Assembly. So,
but before that, the Prime Minister also said कि जब तक मैं जिंदा हूं तब तक मैं ये इंश्योर करूंगा कि मैं हिंदुस्तान को भी पीछे छोड़ दूं। तो अब मैं क्या, I can't use profanity, but there's a word which starts with
नहीं, I have that clip. I have to play that clip also. अभी तूने बोला है तो वो क्लिप बजाता हूँ मैं। देख, ये क्लिप है ना, इन्हीं छोटी-छोटी खुशियों के लिए,
just to show how good they are doing.
So these are two sides of Pakistan. So one was this clip, now one is this one. देखो,
मेरे भाइयों और मेरी बहनों, सुनना मेरी बात। आज ये शहबाज शरीफ बड़ा खताकार आदमी है, नवाज शरीफ का फैन है, नवाज शरीफ का फॉलोअर है। मैं आपको उस खुदाए बुजुर्गों बरतर की कसम खाकर कहता हूं कि जब तक मेरी जान में जान है, हम सब मिलकर पाकिस्तान को अजीम बनाएंगे, हिंदुस्तान को शिकस्त देंगे इंशाल्लाह। जोर न बोलो, मैं ठीक आखिर हाँ। मैं थोड़ी जो खिदमत की थी, गाल कट की थी और कम ज्यादा थी गया। ये मेरी आदत है। मेरे अल्लाह बख्शे वालिद साहब मैं कोई गल सिखाई, मियाँ नवाज शरीफ को सिखाई। तो मैं थोड़ा एक वादा कर चले कि पाकिस्तान असी इंशाअल्लाह उस रब नूं मंजूर है, रब सोने नूं मंजूर है, उस रब सोने नूं मंजूर होया तो इंशाअल्लाह मेहनत करांगे, रात दिन मेहनत करांगे तो एक दिन आएगा कि हिंदुस्तान पिछले न छुटे। तो मेरा नाम शहबाज शरीफ नहीं है। खोसा साहब फरमाते ने कि लिया कौन सा पुल नवाज शरीफ ने बनाया था। मैं मियाँ साहब को
ओ यार टेबल नु क्यों मारी जाता है?
पागल है। But just see what he said. He said जे अल्लाह नु मंजूर होया, ठीक है, मतलब if Allah agrees, then we will work hard, and then if we work hard, we will leave India behind. This guy is supposed to be a bloody prime minister of a country. Okay, he won a fraudulent election and he's in power because of a fraudulent election. Utterly shameless people. But ठीक है, अब पाकिस्तान यही है तो क्या? What do you expect from these guys? But quite clearly,
but see, that's the thing. Now here is the care. No, sorry. Go ahead.
नहीं, मैं यही बोल रहा था, बस these guys are. He's standing in front of a public forum and he's making these declarations that if we don't defeat India, you change my name. Now, last time he said you can change my name was when he said I will drag Zardari on the streets and I will hang him upside down to take out every penny that he has stolen from this country. So he hasn't changed his name so far. Then he said, and he hasn't got any money out of Zardari. Zardari and that entire criminal cabal has spirited away the money in chateaus in France and fancy apartments in New York, and the precious little that Shahbaz Sharif or anybody else has been able to do about it. And then he said that I will, if I cannot give people cheap atta, then I will sell all my clothes to make sure that nobody stays hungry in Pakistan. Pakistan's poverty levels have risen. I think they're close to 45% now, maybe even higher by some estimates. So this is under his watch. So ठीक है, ये हाथ पैर इधर उधर घुमाते रहो तकरीरें करने के लिए, that's all very well, but it doesn't change the fact that Pakistan is sliding. It's continuing to slide. There's no arrest in the slide that is taking place.
So here's what I find very confusing. Here is a man who's saying that Balochistan would leave them in the National Assembly. He's like, I believe there are certain districts. And see, these are serious politicians. They act like jokers, but they know the reality inside. You have followed enough of Pakistan. I don't need to tell you. They know the state of affairs in their country. So then why would the Prime Minister come and start making such inane statements? And I mean, I understand, they are Punjabis, and Punjabis, your people, my people are weird. But yaar, matlab, koi limit hoti hai ki nahi? At the end of the day, like, doesn't the army come and tell them? First of all, how did the army allow a statement like this on the floor of the House and the National Assembly?
No, on the floor of the National Assembly, they can't restrain a statement. See, first about Shahbaz Sharif. He's a boot polisher. He polishes the boots of the generals, and that's his. That's the secret sauce that he has to stay in power. The army needs a civilian facade. This guy is basically a rubber stamp prime minister, not to be taken seriously. I really hope that nobody in the government of India takes this joker seriously. Or for that matter, even his brother at this point in time, because there is this thing that Mr. Modi will be inclined to listen to Nawaz Sharif. Nawaz Sharif is a non-entity now, right? One is that. But on Maulana Fazl-ur-Rehman, I think that is important. See, one, I agree that Fazl-ur-Rehman is a very, very wily politician and to some extent a very wise politician. I think the statement which he made is at one level a bit of an exaggeration in the sense that I don't think there's anybody ready to declare independence and then achieve it just yet. But the things in Balochistan are terrible. There are large swaths of territory, including the 7 odd districts that he's talking about, some other politicians in Pakistan are talking about. There are large areas in Balochistan, especially the Baloch belt, which means basically the Makran coast and then that entire Kalat and that Khuzar belt. The writ of this government really is very, very tenuous, if it runs at all. The capacities of the Baloch freedom fighters have increased tremendously, which is visible from the kind of attacks, very coordinated attacks that they've been able to launch, and across a very wide geography. It's not that in one city they've attacked in 3 places. It's in multiple cities at the same time, coordinated attacks. The lethality of their attacks has increased. Maybe 5 years back, 6 years back, if they would attack some place, the damage caused was pretty minimal. Now they are ambushing convoys, they are attacking security forces posts, they are going into cities and capturing cities. Okay, only for maybe a couple of hours. But this is how insurgency is run, right? You don't necessarily have to grab territory for an insurgency to be successful. You have to undermine the authority of the occupying state to make an insurgency effective, which is what they seem to be doing. So I think they've got the firepower. I think they've got the passion. They've got the recruits. And the Pakistani state is still working on the same principles that it has worked for decades, which is that you get hold of a puppet like this fellow Sarfaraz Bhukti, who has been associated with death squads, who is basically a lackey. He won't get a dog catcher's vote, right? But this kind of a clown has been installed albeit on a People's Party ticket. He has been installed as the chief minister. He's been in all sorts of parties, but he's basically a military, one of those hanger-ons of the military who have been appointed now the chief minister. Earlier, for example, you had this fellow Anwarul Kakar, who's another typical stooge of the military, who was installed as the caretaker prime minister. So those kind of characters, dubious characters who have been picked up by the military, patronized by them, and then put into positions of authority. And then you had, people who were basically the old tribal elite, the old elite, and then, of course, some new businessmen like this fellow who, Sadiq Sanjarani, who was the chairman of the Senate not too long back. So basically a crook who managed to get government contracts and all kinds of other things, and then ingratiated himself into the power corridors, and then was catapulted, basically a party of one. But, with his connections, was catapulted to the chairman of Senate. And they formed this party called, very appropriately named, BAP Party. Balochistan Awami Party, but the acronym BAP Party was the BAP inka Fauj mein tha. The Pakistan Army was the father of this party. So, those are the kind of games these guys are playing. And then the security operations are all about catching hold of anybody who's like 16, 17 years of age till about 30, 35. There are massive disappearances taking place. Students are being picked up. Dissent has been quelled completely. Even libraries are being arrested, so as to speak. If you have a book fair in which you put some of these old typical nonsensical Marxist literature, those books are arrested basically. So they are adopting those kind of tactics, little realizing that every time they indulge in repression, the ground under their feet shifts tremendously. So I think the situation in Balochistan is extremely serious. In fact, Kushal, I'll go to the extent of saying that the situation west of the Indus, right, whether it's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or it's Balochistan, is like deteriorating alarmingly. And you just need to look at the numbers, not that the numbers are very faithfully reported. Very often, the Pakistan Army hides the kind of casualties that are taking place, the kind of operations that have taken place. They hide all of that. But even what is coming out in the public domain, it tells you that this is an area which is very severely affected. It's a full-blown insurgency which is underway. And in Balochistan, at least, this insurgency can be traced back to, most people trace it to 2006, after Akbar Bukti was assassinated by the Pakistan Army. But I go back to around 2001 when we saw the first stirrings of this new insurgency emerge, especially in and around Quetta, when people, are from around the surrounding hills would fire rockets onto the Quetta cantonment. And I trace it back to that point of time. So what I'm saying is that it's like almost 25 years, and now it's picked up pace again. It picked up tremendous pace around 2007 to 2010, 11. Then there was massive repression. Then these guys ran away. They regrouped. Now it's reached another new level. And this is even more ferocious than what it was in the past. So it's clearly a very serious situation. And you have the typical Punjabi nonsensical attitude, chak deyange phatte type of nonsense, which these idiots keep spouting. And frankly, as an aside, I really think that Punjabis should not be given any governance responsibilities anywhere in the world. They're good people to follow orders, maybe do business, stuff like that. But you give them governance, they'll botch it up. And I think Pakistan is a prime example of how they've botched up things. And of course, the army should never be given any charge of any place, because they have a limited understanding of how societies work. Pakistan Army, of course, thinks that it is the repository of all the wisdom in the world. So from launching rockets to cryptocurrency to deep philosophical thinking, they are capable of everything. but basically the profundity ends at talking about fifth generation warfare. That is how as much of profundity that you can get from a Pakistan army general. Five generation warfare. They think they sound very profound whenever they say this, but that's about it. Hybrid warfare, five generation warfare, fifth generation warfare. ये इनकी profundity का level है. So ये with these kind of people, it's not surprising that the situation has gone out of control.
Now, two questions. On one hand, we have the scenario of people being kidnapped in Balochistan by the army, young kids being brutally murdered by the Pakistani army. And then we have a very large protest being led by um,
Maharang
Mehrang
Baloch.
Baloch. She came all the way to Islamabad to, yeah. So, how do you make of that entire scenario where you have a very popular protest?
Yeah, so that's the other thing, and I would say in both the provinces. But since we are talking about Balochistan right now, it is remarkable the kind of social transformation that has started taking place in Balochistan. I've said this earlier and I'll say it again. It's a very, at one level, it's a very tolerant, and even I would go to the extent of saying a secular society. But it is also a very orthodox and a very conservative society. Women were generally not seen in public life as much in Balochistan, partly because of tribal factors, partly because of other reasons. Now, there is a massive social transformation that has taken place over these last 25 odd years. So, for example, one factor which we can see happen is that in the past, what used to happen was whenever there was an insurgency or there was any kind of an upsurge, it was basically tribal linked, right? So it would be the two or three big tribal sardars and their followers who would pick up the weapons and go against the Pakistani state. And there would be other tribal chieftains because of animosities, rivalries, etc. They would side with the Pakistan state. Now, the new breed of both political activists who are seeking freedom, for want of a better word, or separation, or even greater rights, political rights, or for that matter, the militant part of it. They are cutting across tribal lines. So those tribal rivalries, enmities, all of that has been pushed aside, and people are coalescing for a national cause, so as to speak. There's still not a national movement as such, but we are seeing stirrings of that in this, what is called the Baloch Yakjehti Council, which is basically of which Mehrang Baloch is a member. The second big transformation we have seen is the emergence of women as leaders of this movement. And frankly, you look at somebody like, and it's not that these are the first women to come out of this movement. There have been others as well, including that lady who was killed in, which the Canadians very valiantly and very bravely say that no, she committed suicide. I'm Karima Baloch, if I'm not, yeah, right. But very clearly she was killed by the Pakistanis and the ISI, but Trudeau and his Khalistani gang probably covered up that entire incident and made it seem like a suicide. But so there have been people like that as well. But what people like Mehrang Baloch, and partly I think they should credit the Pakistani state for its stupidity for catapulting them to such a leadership position. So when you were talking about that they marched all the way to Islamabad, what were they asking for, right? They were asking for, give us a hearing, listen to us, talk to us. What did the Pakistanis do? They first send in goons after them. इन्होंने जो अपना कैंप लगाया हुआ था outside the National Press Club, they sent in goons to do a counter demonstration. Then they started, and this was in the winter, right? Then they started throwing water on these people. They disrupted their camp, etc., etc. They carried out all kinds of intimidatory tactics to deny these people, any space for airing their grievances. Now, they did that. And the moment this lady goes back to Balochistan, she's a heroine. Today, you have a situation where she can snap her finger and you will have 100,000 people. This ass, Sarfaraz Bukti, who's a murderer, let him get even 5,000 people on his own team. Forget 5,000 people, let him get 500 people on his own team. He's such a bloody loser, right? But this woman can snap a finger and get 100,000 people in a sparsely populated place like Balochistan. You will have people cutting across tribal lines, people cutting across age, people cutting across gender, thronging her rallies to listen to her. That's one. So she is there. There is another woman by the name of, I think, Samideen Baloch. And then, of course, there are all the other people associated with the Baloch Yagjati Council who are part and parcel of this. But, this is the transformation that they've allowed, and they have no problems in the fact that somebody like a Maharang Baloch is seen as the leader. So this is the kind of impact that this lady has started having on the ground. And it's quite crazy, because when you see the kind of passion, the kind of the outpouring, the kind of support which she has, and what effectively has happened, which is now, you don't have to take my word for it, but you can take the word of very, very senior traditional leaders, people like former chief ministers like Akhtar Mengal, who has now resigned from parliament, or that other guy, Dr. Abdul Malik Baloch, who was also a former chief minister. They say that we are going to meet her. What happens in these kind of societies is that a younger person has to come to a senior person. In this case, it's the big guys who go to meet her. Okay? And they say, and they're very open about it. They say, nobody listens to us anymore. Bloody nobody listens to the tribal sardars anymore. Nobody listens to any political leader anymore. They listen to this woman and her supporters and her cohort, really. And I think that's a remarkable transformation. So, and this political movement is moving parallel to the militant movement. So the militant movement, we've already spoken about how much strength it has gained in the recent years. And this political movement has also gone from strength to strength. Like I said, that everybody else is a non-entity. Now people will say, okay, why don't they fight an election? What is the value of an election in Pakistan? It's a travesty. An election is a travesty in Pakistan. देख लिया था ना पिछला इलेक्शन में कि सारा, it's a major and a captain who decides what the result is going to be. So, to say that have an election and decide popularity is meaningless in a country like Pakistan, which is a completely fictitious democracy. So you have this woman and her people in Balochistan, and then when you go to KP, again you have these what you might call people's movements and a militant movement as well. So the militant movement will, and unlike in Balochistan where you can still see some at least some kind of synergy between the two, maybe they're both moving parallelly to each other. There is technically no real connection between the militant and the political movement, but in a sense, they're both complementing each other. In KP, there is a militant movement, which is the Taliban or the Tehreek-e-Taliban. And opposed to them, there is a civil society movement, which is the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, which again is attracting enormous amounts of support from many of the young Pashtun population in that area. Again, a movement which should have been accommodated by the Pakistani authorities, which should have been empowered, because these were guys who are talking about, yeah, they're nationalists, but they're also talking about stuff like fighting the Taliban. They're talking about progressive values. They want women to be part and parcel of their movement. They're talking about all good things, right? Now, ideally, you should, if not co-opt, at least accommodate these guys. What is the Pakistani Punjabi reaction been? Suppress them, kill them. When they demonstrate, fire at them, kill them, put them in jail. That's the Punjabis are, I'm telling you, they're such duffers now. It's not even funny anymore. So that's what they've done to the PTM. So you have these two parallel movements, again in KP, but which also fight against each other. And then in KP, the pot is further poisoned by the fact that you have something like the PTI, which is also got a reservoir of support in the province. So you have that, which is also, in a manner of speaking, arraigned against the Pakistan military and the Pakistani authorities. So you have multiple kind of players in a place like KP, which really does not augur very well. The only difference is that in Balochistan, the Baloch Yahdi Council has still to, which is what they tried, when they had this huge jirga, or this huge, I'm forgetting the exact name. It was a national gathering, Raji Muchi, which they called it, basically a Baloch national gathering in Gwadar, which they tried to hold, which was sabotaged by the Pakistan army. They are trying to create a kind of a political national movement, which of course the Punjabi army is trying to stop. But what has started happening is quite remarkable. And I don't think people are really taking cognizance of it. There is, of course, the usual cynicism, including among some circles in India, that, the Pakistan army is allowing it to continue. Just then, whenever they want, they can crack down, butcher them, massacre them, which is what they've done in the past. But I wonder if that will be that easy this time around, given the kind of new technologies which have come in, the kind of people, the way people are telescoping on the issue, people are watching what is happening in this region. It's not going to be that easy to carry out, a Bangladesh like pogrom, and get away with it. So clearly there is a political way of tackling these kind of movements, but to expect the stupid Punjabi military in Pakistan to wisen up to politics, they can do politics, that typical tucha, chalak kind of nonsensical politics, threaten somebody, bribe somebody, that stupid kind of petty, ghatia level of politics Pakistan army can do, because that's the stock in the Pakistan army. But, having a much greater political vision, which you can then accommodate, these diverse interests into the national mainstream, I think it's beyond them.
Now, this is the interesting bit as far as Pakistan is concerned. With Balochistan, I think there will be I think the two major players that are interested in Balochistan, primarily, obviously, India, because Pakistan is I mean, I don't know what else to say. Pakistan is an enemy state. I don't know why people in India want to, pretend that it is not. It is an enemy state. And
हमारे बोलने से क्या होता है? पाकिस्तानी खुद नहीं बोलते हमारे को दुश्मन देश है. So why are we shy of calling them an enemy? साले दुश्मन हैं तो हैं वो यार. Why should we treat them otherwise?
Exactly. So Pakistan being an enemy state, so our hostility to them is very natural and very strategic and very logical. In my view, we would be interested in a Pakistan that is weak and destabilized. I mean, I don't know why people think me saying that on a podcast as a podcaster is very problematic. I get Pakistani people writing to me, "आप ऐसे कैसे बोलते हो?" तो और कैसे बोले भाई? I mean, I am a national security hawk. Like मैं तो मेरे को तो कोई शर्म भी नहीं आती है बोलने में. I think India should do everything in its power to make Pakistan weak. On the other hand, China has interests in Balochistan as far as the mining is concerned, as far as minerals are concerned, and many other things are concerned. And the Baloch independent movement's hostility to the Chinese and the amount of times the Pakistani political class or the armed forces and their so-called I call them the Huzure Wala visits to China, where they go and say, Sir ji, maaf kar deo, asi dekh lenne a kind of a thing. They go
Very
salute,
banana,
salute
very banana.
marne jate hain. And then in all of yeah, they do that all the time, right? And then you have, now I want to focus on Trump. Like Trump has come in and he has just I it's very hard to define Trump's foreign policy in a word. It's just all over the place. Like, I'll tariff you, I don't need you. Okay, you have $5 million, come in, green card. I mean, I just don't understand the Trump foreign policy. In a situation like this, how does Trump deal with the Pakistan, and especially with the whole Baloch issue?
Look, as far as the Chinese are concerned, I think it's very clear that the reason for aiming at the Chinese for the Baloch is a very clear one, that they see the Chinese as the greatest underwriters of the Pakistani project, right? And they see that the Chinese will be the new oppressors and the new colonizers. So earlier it was Punjab that was colonizing Balochistan. Now the Punjabis have got their overlords, the Chinese, to come and colonize, exploit the people, deny them their rights. And you just need to look at what they've done in Gwadar and how they have completely marginalized the fishing community in that area and allowed these Chinese trawlers and others to come in, which has created problems out there. Incidentally, what the Pakistanis tried to do was what again they that typical chalaki kind of thing. I wanted to use another word before chalaki, but you can guess what it is. What they tried to do was that they got hold of their old loyalists, and this is Pakistani are past masters in it. So you'll see a lot of Pakistanis come up with being very overtly friendly to India. Those are the people you should never trust. You should be rest assured that anybody who is talking nicely about India, he is a complete fraud, and who has been put up to this task to abuse his own country and to appreciate India, so that the Indians are such big khuddus that they will kind of say bada acha, and which you see all the time, bada अच्छे लोग हैं, बड़े अच्छे लोग हैं, बड़ा उन्होंने ये बोला, that kind of shit. So that is what they do, and the same thing they do inside. So what they've done is that they get the Jamaat-e-Islami, which is an old loyalist. They got hold of a cleric from the Jamaat-e-Islami who started a counter movement, again talking about people's issues, right? This is Hidayatur-Rehman, and he started this new movement inside Gwadar. But clearly, and then he fought an election and he kind of accommodated himself and he cut deals and all sorts of things. So he's lost his credibility. The Jamaat is trying to find it, but basically a counter movement to undercut the support of the BYC and Maharang Baloch and the others. So this is one thing which they've tried to do. But the Chinese are going to be targeted simply because they're seen as oppressors, and they've not done anything to convince the people of Balochistan. They talk a lot that we are doing it for development, we are creating jobs, etc., etc. Nobody buys their bullshit. So they are being targeted, and the Chinese are pissed off with the Pakistanis because they say that, look, you keep coming and genuflecting before us and promising us the world, and how the Punjabis do. Janab, 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 dasso na, asi karange. Jis Janab, tusi figure na karo. That kind of shit that Punjabis deal in. ho jayega, that kind of nonsense. So, which they can't handle. And the Chinese are now pissed off about it. So that is as far as the China factor is concerned. The American factor, look, one, you're right. What Trump has done is what they say na raita bahut phila diya. He's just spread it all over the place. So there is no sense of a focus on how he wants to handle the various issues around the world. And he's got this, and probably that is just one part of him, but at least that's the public part which is coming out in the public domain. It's all about selling and buying stuff, tariffs and shit like that. The larger strategic thinking, at least from Trump, he has some really smart people in his cabinet, but at least from Trump we are not getting it. All that we see is this person is tariff, I'm going to do this to this, I'm going to do this to that, that kind of nonsense. So I don't see the Americans having a lot of focus on Pakistan. Maybe if they dumb it down significantly, their focus on Pakistan will be that, okay, fine, we are not going to deal with these guys beyond a point, but we have a limited kind of a focus with them on terrorism and other stuff. Okay, fine, we'll deal with the Pakistan army to the extent that it means that we need to keep the Taliban in their place. So maybe there'll be some understanding on that count. But beyond that, I don't know how much more they can, or what more they stand to gain from Pakistan. What will the Pakistan sell them? How much bed linen and bloody, the pillow covers can the Pakistanis sell? Which is what they make. Aur kya banate hain? Pakistan is competitive in polio these days, right? That is one of the big exports, or something in which they have a lot of competitive advantage to everybody else in the world. Polio, HIV virus, which is spreading in Pakistan with all their Islam and all of that. HIV, it's almost a kind of an epidemic if you look at the number of cases. That's what they're competitive in, and a bit of this bed linen kind of nonsense. They don't even grow their own cotton now, so they have to import it. So how much of that will they sell to the Americans? And if the same reciprocal tariffs are now going to be put on the Pakistanis, then I don't know how their export markets are going to be affected. So one is that factor. But I think what you can get the Americans interested in, I don't know if the Baloch have it in them, if they have somebody to lobby for them. You're talking about India. Yeah, India can be sitting on the sidelines and watching what is happening in Balochistan, and it will warm the cockles of every Indian heart, except some exceptions, like a certain former petroleum minister and others, whose heart beat not for India, but for the enemy. But most Indians I think, would be very happy with what the hell is happening in Pakistan. That, okay, fine, it's karma biting these buggers back. And I don't really, there is really no evidence, despite everything that the Pakistanis blurt out. For them, it's the simplest thing to do, blame it on India. But there is no evidence really. And I know the moment I say this, there'll be some asshole coming on your program and saying, well, Bhushan Jadhav, that kind of nonsense. They can't even say Jadhav properly. They'll say Jadev or something. So you'll have that kind of nonsense coming in. But there is really no solid evidence of any Indian involvement behind the Baloch. I think they managed to do things on their own.